wheelchair tipped backward, and Meredith hit the cold hardwood floor, 8 months pregnant, helpless, unable to get up on her own. Her husband Derek stepped over her body like she was garbage. His mistress watched from the doorway, smiling. "You'll be moving out by Friday," he said. "Tiffany is moving in." But Derek made one fatal mistake. He didn't know that Meredith's brother was walking up the front porch at that exact moment. A Marine captain, still in his dress uniform, fresh from 18 months in a combat zone. What Garrett discovered next would expose a monster hiding behind a charming smile. A secret first wife who died in a suspicious car accident, a $2 million life insurance policy with a forged signature, and a pattern of dead women stretching back 15 years. This is the story of how one pregnant woman in a wheelchair brought down a killer and rose from the ashes of her destroyed life to build something beautiful. Stay with me until the end. Until this journey is worth every minute. The wheelchair tipped backward without warning. Meredith's hands reached desperately for something to grab. Anything at all. The armrest slipped through her fingers like water. Her body hit the hardwood floor with a sickening thud that echoed through the silent living room. 8 months of baby weight crashed against the cold, unforgiving surface. The impact stole every ounce of breath from her lungs. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. Above her, Derek's Italian leather shoes stepped backward. Not toward her, not to help her, away from her crumpled body on the floor. "Get up." His voice was cold, flat, empty of any emotion she recognized, like he was speaking to a disobedient tea that had misbehaved. "Stop being so dramatic, Meredith. You're embarrassing yourself." She couldn't get up. The doctors had explained this to him multiple times. Derek knew the situation perfectly well. He had been in the room when Dr. Weston delivered the diagnosis. Placenta previa, a dangerous condition where the placenta covered the cervix. Any sudden movement, any strain, any fall could trigger life-threatening hemorrhaging. The wheelchair wasn't weakness or laziness or drama. It was the only thing keeping their daughter alive inside her. "Derek, please." Her hand reached upward, trembling, desperate. The wedding ring on her finger caught the afternoon light streaming through the bay windows. "I can't get up by myself. You know I can't. The doctor said..." "The doctors say a lot of things." He stepped over her body like she was furniture, like she was nothing at all, like 8 years of marriage meant absolutely nothing to him. Most of it is just to cover their liability. You could walk if you really wanted to. Behind him, a woman laughed nervously. The laugh was young, high-pitched, uncertain. The perfume that drifted down toward Meredith was expensive. French, maybe. Something floral with notes of jasmine and vanilla. It definitely wasn't Meredith's perfume. "Derek, maybe we should help her up," the woman started to say. Her voice carried a hint of discomfort, perhaps even concern. "She's fine. She does this for attention constantly." Derek's hand found the woman's waist. The touch was possessive, familiar, practiced, like he had done it 1,000 times before. "Meredith, this is Tiffany. She works at my firm. She'll be moving into the house this weekend." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You'll be moving out by Friday." The floor was cold against Meredith's cheek. January in Texas could be brutal, and the heating system Derek had refused to fix for 3 months made the hardwood feel like ice. Her daughter kicked inside her womb. Once, twice, 3 times. Hard, insistent movements. Fighting even now. Fighting when her mother couldn't find the strength to fight. Meredith stared at her own hand pressed flat against the cold floor. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. The diamonds sparkled, mocking her. She had cleaned that ring just yesterday, polished it carefully with the special cloth her mother-in-law had given her as a wedding gift. She had spent 20 minutes making sure it was perfect. Like that mattered now. Like any of it had ever mattered at all. "Derek," her voice cracked on his name. She hated the weakness in it, hated how small she sounded, how pathetic. "I'm 8 months pregnant with your daughter. Where exactly am I supposed to go?" "That's not really my problem anymore, is it?" He didn't even look at her when he said it. His eyes were fixed on Tiffany, on the future he had apparently been planning for months, maybe years. "You have family somewhere, a mother in Austin, right? Go stay with..." Her, I'm sure she'd love the company. The casual cruelty of his words hit harder than the fall itself. Tiffany shifted uncomfortably beside him. Her high heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she adjusted her weight from one foot to the other. She was blonde, young, maybe 27 or 28 years old, pretty in that polished corporate way that Derek had always admired. Perfect makeup, designer clothes, the kind of woman who belonged on the arm of a successful investment banker. The kind of woman Meredith used to be before the pregnancy complications stole her energy, before months of bed rest turned her muscles soft, before Derek's constant criticism eroded her confidence until she barely recognized herself in the mirror. "Derek, she's really pregnant," Tiffany said again. Her voice carried a stronger note of concern this time, almost accusatory. "You told me she couldn't have children. You said she was infertile." The words hit Meredith like a physical blow. He had told his mistress that she was infertile. He had lied about the very pregnancy that was putting her life at risk. "I told you a lot of things, Tiffany." Derek's smile was the one Meredith knew too well, the charming mask, the lie he wore as easily as his expensive cologne. "Meredith exaggerates her condition constantly. She's been doing it for months. The doctors said bed rest is precautionary. She could walk perfectly fine if she actually wanted to." That was a lie, a complete and absolute lie. Meredith had the medical records to prove it. She had nearly bled out twice already, once in the bathroom at 3 in the morning, once in the kitchen making dinner. The placenta was positioned dangerously low, covering nearly the entire cervix. Any strain could trigger catastrophic hemorrhaging, could kill her, could kill their baby. Dr. Weston had explained all of this to Derek personally, had shown him the ultrasound images, had made him sign forms acknowledging the risks. He knew exactly what he was doing when he tipped that wheelchair. But she didn't have the strength to argue. Not from the floor, not with her hip throbbing where it had struck the hardwood, not with her daughter's father standing over her like she was trash to be discarded with yesterday's garbage. The front door opened suddenly. The sound of heavy boots on the wooden porch echoed through the entryway. A voice Meredith hadn't heard in 18 months filled the house with its familiar warmth. "Mere surprise, little sister. I got home early from deployment, and I thought I'd swing by to see." Garrett's voice died completely. He stood frozen in the doorway. Marine dress uniform immaculate. Captain's bars gleaming on his shoulders like they had been polished that morning. 18 months deployed overseas in combat zones she couldn't even imagine. Dangerous missions in countries she had to look up on a map. Things he never talked about during his rare phone calls home. Nothing in those 18 months had prepared him for this. His baby sister, lying on the floor of her own living room. 8 months pregnant, belly pressing against cold hardwood. A stranger's hand resting possessively on her husband's arm. The husband who was supposed to protect her. The husband Garrett had trusted to keep her safe. "What the hell is happening here?" Garrett's voice dropped to something dangerous. Something Meredith had never heard from her gentle older brother in all their years growing up together. Derek's charming smile faltered for exactly 1 second. Just one heartbeat of uncertainty flickered across his handsome face. Then the mask slid smoothly back into place. The charm offensive that had fooled everyone for years activated with practiced ease. "Garrett, what a surprise." Derek extended his hand for a handshake, like nothing was wrong. Like his pregnant wife wasn't lying helpless on the floor behind him. Like this was just a normal afternoon visit. "We weren't expecting you home so soon. How was the deployment? Must have been quite an experience." Garrett ignored the extended hand completely. He moved with military efficiency, 3 strides across the living room, and he was kneeling beside Meredith. His hands were gentle despite the fury radiating from his entire body. The contrast between his soft touch and his rigid posture told Meredith everything she needed to know about how angry he really was. "Mir, can you move? Is the baby okay? Talk to me, sweetheart." Her hands were shaking uncontrollably now, the adrenaline coursing through her system, the shock of everything that had happened in the last 5 minutes, the humiliation of her brother seeing her like this, broken, helpless, pathetic. "I don't know," she whispered. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, small and scared. "I don't know if she's okay. I felt her kick after the fall, but now she's not moving anymore." "She's not moving, Garrett." "Call 911. Garrett's voice was pure command, not a request, not a suggestion. An order from a man who had spent years leading Marines into combat situations. A man who expected to be obeyed immediately. "She's perfectly fine," Derek started to say with an exasperated sigh. "She's just being dramatic as usual. She does this all the time to get attention. If you just give her a minute, she'll—" "I wasn't talking to you." Garrett's eyes stayed locked on his sister's face, but his words were directed at Derek with ice-cold precision. "I was talking to your girlfriend, the woman in the expensive heels standing behind you." He paused. "Call 901 now." Tiffany fumbled for her phone with trembling hands. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped clumsily against the screen. She was looking at Meredith differently now, really seeing her for the first time. The pregnant belly straining against faded maternity clothes. The wheelchair overturned beside her on the floor. The medical alert bracelet on her thin wrist. The exhaustion carved into features that were too young for such deep shadows under her eyes. "She's pregnant," Tiffany whispered. The words came out horrified, disgusted, directed at Derek with growing accusation. "She's really pregnant, very pregnant. You told me she couldn't have children. You told me she was your ex-wife. You told me the divorce was finalized 2 years ago." "Tiffany, sweetheart, let me explain the situation to you." 8 months pregnant." Tiffany's voice rose higher, her perfect composure cracking. "In a wheelchair. She's in a wheelchair because of pregnancy complications, Derek, and you pushed her out of it. I watched you do it. I watched you tip that wheelchair backward while your pregnant wife was sitting in it." She pressed her hand against her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror. I don't know what I thought. You told me she was your crazy ex-girlfriend. You said she stalked you after the divorce. You said she was obsessed with you. You said she was mentally unstable." Tiffany's voice broke. "She was supposed to be the villain in your story. She was supposed to be—" "Tiffany, please just calm down and let me explain everything properly." "Explain what exactly?" Tiffany stepped away from him, revulsion clear on her beautiful face. "Explain that you're a monster? Explain that everything you told me for the past 3 years has been a complete lie?" 3 years. The words hit Meredith like another blow to her already bruised body. 3 years of affair while she was working 60-hour weeks to support his career change from accounting to investment banking. While she was undergoing painful fertility treatments that left her exhausted and emotional. While she was finally getting pregnant after years of trying and crying and hoping. 3 years of lies. 3 years of Derek leaving their bed to be with another woman. 3 years of him looking into Meredith's eyes and telling her he loved her while betraying her in the most fundamental way possible. Garrett carefully slid his arms beneath Meredith's shoulders and knees. He lifted her from the cold floor like she weighed nothing at all. Years of military training, protective instinct honed since childhood. The same brother who had taught her to ride a bike when she was 5, who had threatened every boyfriend she ever brought home, who had walked her down the aisle at her wedding because their father had died of cancer 2 years earlier, who had trusted Derek to take care of his baby sister. "The ambulance is on its way," Tiffany said quietly. Her voice was still shaking badly. "They said 7 minutes. They said to keep her still and watch for any bleeding." "Thank you." Garrett carried Meredith to the couch, settled her gently against the cushions. His hands checked her pulse with practiced efficiency, felt her forehead for fever. The medical training from his combat experience evident in every precise movement. Derek stood frozen in the middle of the living room, the room he and Meredith had decorated together 5 years ago. The house they had bought with dreams of filling every room with children and laughter and love. Those dreams felt like they belonged to another lifetime now. "This is my house," Derek said finally. His voice carried a petulant edge that Meredith had heard many times before, usually when he wasn't getting his way. "You can't just come in here and take over, Garrett. I have rights as her husband. Legal rights." Garrett stood slowly from where he had been kneeling beside his sister. He turned to face Derek with the kind of controlled intensity that made lesser men step backward instinctively. The two men were similar in height, both over 6 feet tall, both broad-shouldered and physically imposing. But Garrett had spent 18 months in active combat zones. His body was harder. His reflexes were sharper. His patience for men like Derek was completely non-existent. "You have the right to remain silent." Garrett's voice was quiet, almost conversational, but the threat underneath was unmistakable. "I strongly suggest you exercise that right immediately, because if you say one more word about your rights while my pregnant sister is lying injured on your couch, I will exercise my right to end you." Derek opened his mouth to respond with something sharp. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension like a knife. Meredith pressed her hand against her swollen belly, waiting, praying, hoping desperately for any sign of movement from her daughter. "Please be okay. Please be okay. Please be okay." Her daughter kicked, hard, strong, insistent, still fighting, still alive, still refusing to give up. Tears streamed down Meredith's face as the paramedics rushed through the front door with their equipment and their calm professionalism. She wasn't entirely sure if she was crying from relief that her baby was still moving, or from grief for the death of everything she had believed her life was supposed to be. Maybe both. Probably both. The ambulance ride blurred into a series of disconnected sensations that Meredith would struggle to piece together later. The cold metal of the gurney pressing against her back through the thin hospital gown. The scratchy texture of the emergency blanket tucked carefully around her shoulders. The steady electronic beeping of the fetal heart monitor strapped securely around her swollen belly. The slightly metallic smell of medical equipment and antiseptic that seemed to permeate every corner of the vehicle. Garrett held her hand the entire way to the hospital. His grip was firm but gentle, warm and reassuring despite the chaos swirling around them. The same hands that had held hers at their father's funeral 3 years ago. The same hands that had steadied her when she called him crying from her honeymoon in Maui. That phone call should have been her first warning sign. Derek had screamed at her for 45 minutes because she had worn the wrong dress to dinner at an expensive restaurant. A blue sundress instead of the black cocktail dress he had apparently expected her to pack. He had called her stupid, thoughtless, an embarrassment to him in front of the other wealthy couples dining around them. She had locked herself in the bathroom of their honeymoon suite and called her brother in tears. Garrett had offered to fly to Hawaii immediately and bring her home. She had refused, made excuses for Derek's behavior, blamed herself for not understanding what he wanted, apologized for overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. She should have listened to Garrett then, should have recognized the warning signs that were already so clear, should have trusted her own instincts instead of Derek's explanations. But she hadn't, and now here she was. "Heart rate is looking stable," the paramedic announced, breaking through Meredith's spiraling thoughts. "Both mom and baby are presenting well so far, but we definitely need that ultrasound to check for any placental abruption from the fall." Placental abruption, the medical term Meredith had learned to fear over the past 4 months of complications. The condition where the placenta separates from the uterine wall before delivery, potentially fatal for both mother and child if not caught immediately. The ambulance pulled into the emergency bay of Austin Memorial Hospital with a slight jolt. The back doors flew open immediately. More hands reached for the gurney. More voices called out medical information in the controlled chaos of a hospital receiving a high-risk patient. 29-year-old female patient, approximately 32 weeks pregnant, documented history of complete placenta, previa, fall from wheelchair at home, possible trauma to the abdominal region, fetal heart rate currently stable at 142. Meredith closed her eyes against the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room. Let the medical professionals work around her. Let them do whatever they needed to do to keep her daughter safe. She was too exhausted to fight anymore, too drained to do anything but surrender to their expertise. When she opened her eyes again, she was in a private room on the maternity ward. The machines surrounding her bed beeped in steady, reassuring rhythms. An IV line dripped clear fluid into her arm. The lights had been dimmed to a comfortable level. Through the window, she could see that night had fallen while she was being examined and treated. Garrett sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside her hospital bed. His marine dress uniform was rumpled now. The crisp creases softened, a coffee stain on his sleeve that she didn't remember seeing before. It was the first time in her entire life she had seen him look anything less than perfectly put together in uniform. "Hey there, sleeping beauty." His smile was gentle when he noticed her eyes were open, but the worry lines around his eyes betrayed his calm exterior. Welcome back to the land of the conscious. How are you feeling? Like I was pushed out of a wheelchair by my loving husband while his secret girlfriend watched the whole thing. Meredith's voice came out hoarse and scratchy. Her throat felt like sandpaper. How long was I unconscious? About 2 hours. They gave you a mild sedative to help you sleep while they ran all the tests and imaging. Garrett leaned forward and took her hand again. His thumb rubbed soothing circles across her knuckles. The important news is that the baby is completely fine, Mir. The ultrasound showed no signs of abruption, no bleeding, no distress. Your daughter is strong as hell. Tears welled in Meredith's eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. She wiped them away with her free and frustrated by her own emotional fragility. She was so tired of crying, so tired of feeling weak and helpless and out of control. Where's Derek? She forced herself to ask the question, even though part of her didn't want to know the answer. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care where he is right now. Garrett's jaw tightened visibly. The gentle brother disappeared for a moment, replaced by the combat-hardened Marine captain. What I do know is that he's not getting anywhere near you or this baby ever again. Not while I'm still breathing. He paused, seeming to debate whether to share the next piece of information. I called Mom as soon as we got to the hospital. She's already in the car driving down from Austin. Should be here by 2 in the morning. Maybe earlier if she ignores the speed limits like she usually does. Louise Callahan, 61 years old, widowed for 3 years, practical and no nonsense in a way that sometimes drove Meredith crazy, but also fiercely protective of her children in a way that had never wavered. Backbone of steel wrapped in a grandmother's gentle exterior. Meredith had never needed her mother more desperately than she did right now. I can't believe this is actually happening. Meredith stared at the ceiling above her bed. 14 tiles across from one wall to the other. She counted them automatically. 22 tiles from the head of the bed to the foot. The same mindless counting exercise she had used at her father's funeral to keep from completely falling apart. Counting things that didn't matter because everything that truly mattered was falling apart around her. There's something I need to ask you. Garrett's voice shifted to something more careful, more controlled, the tone he used when delivering difficult news. And I need you to be completely honest with me, even if the answer is hard. She already knew what he was going to ask, had been dreading this conversation since the moment he walked through her front door. Has Derek ever physically hurt you before today? And I mean ever. Even once, even something small. The question hung heavy in the antiseptic hospital air. Meredith thought about the bruise on her upper arm from last month, the one shaped like fingerprints, the one she had carefully covered with long sleeves and explained away as bumping into the doorframe while half asleep. She thought about the sprained wrist in November, the one that happened when Derek grabbed her arm too hard during an argument about money, the one she had told the urgent care doctor came from slipping on a wet kitchen floor. She thought about the fall down the stairs in October, the one Derek had called an accident caused by her pregnancy clumsiness. The one that happened suspiciously soon after she questioned a large withdrawal from their savings account. She thought about all the times she had made excuses, minimized, rationalized, blamed herself for provoking him, for not being understanding enough, for not being the perfect wife he deserved. I honestly don't know anymore, she whispered. The admission felt like pulling a splinter from deep under her skin. Painful but necessary. I thought everything was normal. I thought all couples had arguments. I thought I was just being oversensitive because of the pregnancy hormones. The door opened before Garrett could respond. Dr. Patricia Weston entered the room with a tablet computer tucked under her arm. She was 55 years old with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her kind eyes had seen too much pain in 3 decades of obstetric practice. She had been Meredith's OBGYN since the very beginning of this complicated pregnancy. Meredith, I'm so incredibly relieved to see you awake and alert. Dr. Weston pulled a rolling stool close to the bedside and sat down. Captain Callahan, would you mind giving us a few minutes alone? There are some things I need to discuss with your sister privately. Garrett looked at Meredith with a questioning expression, waiting for her permission before leaving. It's okay, Meredith said quietly. Go find some coffee or something. You look like you could use the caffeine. He squeezed her hand once more before standing up. I'll be right outside the door if you need me. Just press the call button. The door clicked shut behind him. Dr. Weston was quiet for a long, measured moment. Her experienced eyes moved slowly over Meredith's face, taking in details that others might miss. The fading yellowish bruise near her left temple, the dark purple circles beneath her exhausted eyes, the amount of weight she had clearly lost instead of gained over the past 2 months. "This is your sixth visit to this hospital in just 2 months," Dr. Weston said finally. Her voice was gentle but firm, professional but caring. "Falls, accidents, complications that don't quite make medical sense. I've been increasingly concerned about the pattern I'm seeing." Meredith opened her mouth to offer an excuse, an explanation, another lie to cover for Derek's behavior. Dr. Weston held up her hand gently. "I've asked you directly about your home situation on 3 separate occasions. Each time you've told me that everything was perfectly fine, that Derek was a wonderful husband, that you were happy." "Everything was fine," Meredith said automatically, the defensive response she had practiced so many times that it came out without conscious thought. "I'm just naturally clumsy. The pregnancy throws off my center of balance. That's all it is." "Meredith," Dr. Weston's voice was impossibly kind, "you're confined to a wheelchair because of the placenta previa. Your center of balance shouldn't be a factor in repeated falls when you're not even walking." The logic was undeniable. Meredith had no response. "I've been a physician for 30 years, Dr. Weston continued. "I've seen what domestic abuse looks like. I've sat with hundreds of women who made excuses for partners who were hurting them. I've watched brilliant, capable, strong women convince themselves that somehow the violence was their own fault." The word violence hit Meredith like a slap across the face. Abuse, violence, such ugly words, such permanent words. "Derek has never actually hit me," she heard herself say. The denial came out automatically, reflexively, a programmed response. "He would never do something like that. He just gets frustrated sometimes. He has a stressful job. He's under a lot of pressure at work." "There are many different kinds of abuse, Meredith." Dr. Weston leaned forward slightly. Her eyes held nothing but compassion and concern. "Emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, financial control, isolation from friends and family who care about you, making someone feel crazy for trusting their own perceptions and experiences, gaslighting." The word floated through Meredith's exhausted mind. She had read about it online during one of her 3 in the morning research sessions. The articles had described her marriage with eerie precision. "3 weeks ago, during your last appointment, you asked me about women's shelters." Dr. Weston's voice softened even further. "Safe houses, emergency resources. You said you were asking for a friend who was in a difficult situation." Meredith remembered that conversation with painful clarity, the shame that had burned through her entire body as she tried to make the question sound casual and unrelated to her own life. The way Derek had arrived to pick her up in the hospital lobby before Dr. Weston could give her any actual information. "I was just asking for a friend," Meredith said, but her voice cracked on the lie. Even she could hear how unconvincing she sounded. "Your brother is in the hallway right now." Dr. Weston glanced toward the closed door. "He told me exactly what he witnessed at your house this afternoon. Your husband physically tipped you out of your wheelchair while you were 8 months pregnant. His girlfriend stood there and watched the entire thing happen." The words hung in the air between them. Impossible to deny, possible to explain away with excuses about clumsiness or misunderstandings. "I didn't know about the girlfriend." Meredith's voice was barely audible. A broken whisper. "I swear to God I had no idea." She said 3 years. She said he's been with her for 3 years. 3 years, the timeline kept echoing in her mind. Before the fertility treatments that left her exhausted and emotional. Before the pregnancy that put her life at risk. Before everything Meredith had sacrificed trying to give Derek the family he claimed he wanted more than anything. For 3 years he had been lying to her face, coming home smelling like another woman's perfume, making excuses about late meetings and business trips, looking into her eyes and telling her he loved her while betraying every promise he had ever made. Dr. Weston reached out and took Meredith's trembling hand. "Your brother also discovered something that concerns me very deeply." Her voice was steady but grave. "He made some phone calls while you were sleeping. He has connections through the military. According to what he found, Derek took out a $2 million life insurance policy on you approximately 3 months ago. He listed himself as the sole beneficiary. Meredith blinked in confusion. What? That's not... I never signed any insurance paperwork. I would remember something like that. According to the preliminary information Captain Callahan obtained, the signature on the application appears to have been forged. Dr. Weston paused to let the implications sink in. Meredith, I need you to understand what this potentially means. If anything were to happen to you during childbirth, if there were complications, if you hemorrhaged, if something went wrong, your husband would receive $2 million. The hospital room started spinning around her. The machines continued their steady beeping. The baby kicked against her ribs. Once, twice, 3 times. Meredith thought about all the accidents over the past few months, the falls that came out of nowhere, the complications that seemed to arise at the worst possible times, the way Derek had consistently resisted her staying in the hospital for observation, the way he always pushed for her to come home early against medical advice. She thought about the wheelchair, the way it had tipped so easily, almost as if someone had practiced the motion before. Oh God. She had been so unbelievably stupid. The warning signs had been everywhere, flashing like neon lights, and she had refused to see them. I need to see my brother, Meredith said suddenly. Her voice was stronger now, clearer, the fog of denial beginning to burn away under the harsh light of truth. Right now, I need to tell him everything I should have told him years ago. Dr. Weston nodded and rose gracefully from her stool. I'll send him in immediately. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. And Meredith, whatever you decide to do next, whatever steps you choose to take, please know that you are not alone in this. There are people who want desperately to help you. You just have to let them in. The door closed softly behind her. Meredith pressed both hands against her swollen belly. Her daughter was moving more actively now, stretching, turning, preparing to enter a world that was so much more dangerous than Meredith had ever allowed herself to imagine. I knew something was wrong, Meredith thought, the realization crystallizing with painful clarity. For months, I knew deep down that something wasn't right. I told myself I was being paranoid, oversensitive, hormonal. He told me I was being paranoid. He made me doubt my own sanity. But I knew, the whole time, some part of me knew the truth. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't imagining things. She was a woman who had been systematically manipulated by the man who had vowed to love and protect her until death do them part. And she was completely done making excuses for his behavior. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of fluorescent hospital lights and increasingly difficult conversations. Garrett essentially set up a military command post in the corner of Meredith's hospital room. He had been granted emergency family leave from the Marines within hours of making a single phone call to his commanding officer. Something about the nature of the situation. Something about a sister in danger. Meredith didn't ask for the specific details. She was simply overwhelmed with gratitude that he was there. Their mother arrived at exactly 2:17 in the morning that first night. Louise Callahan walked into the hospital room carrying a small overnight suitcase in one hand and a large insulated container of homemade chicken soup in the other. Her silver gray hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Her reading glasses were perched crookedly on top of her head. Her comfortable driving shoes were still on her feet. She took one long look at her daughter lying in that hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and IV lines, and immediately burst into tears. My baby girl. Lou wrapped her arms around Meredith as carefully as she could manage, with all the medical equipment in the way. Her familiar lavender perfume enveloped Meredith like a security blanket from childhood. I knew something was wrong. I called you so many times over the past few months, and you always said everything was perfectly fine. But I knew. A mother always knows. I thought everything was fine, Mom. Meredith breathed in the comforting scent that had meant safety and love for her entire life. I thought I was just being oversensitive. Derek kept telling me I was overreacting to normal marriage problems. He kept saying I was being dramatic. You have never been oversensitive in your entire life, Meredith Ann Callahan. Lou pulled back and cupped her daughter's pale face in her weathered hands, hands that had wiped away tears, made school lunches, taught Meredith to bake cookies and change a tire and stand up for herself. You were always my strong one, my practical one, my level-headed girl. If you felt in your gut that something was wrong, then something was very, very wrong. Dr. Weston arrived for morning rounds at 7:30 sharp. She examined Meredith thoroughly with the kind of focused attention that made patients feel genuinely cared for. Checked the baby's heartbeat with the handheld Doppler. Reviewed the overnight monitoring results on her tablet. Palpated Meredith's abdomen with gentle, experienced hands. I have some concerning news and some good news, she announced when she finished her examination. The concerning news is that the baby's heart rate dropped into a worrisome range twice during the night. Not dangerously low, not in the range that would require immediate intervention, but low enough that I want to continue close monitoring. Meredith's hand flew to her belly instinctively. What does that mean for her? Is she going to be okay? The good news is that the heart rate recovered quickly both times and has been stable for the past 6 hours. Dr. Weston's voice was reassuring but honest. However, given the circumstances, the fall, the stress you've been under, the underlying placenta previa, I want to keep you here for at least another full week of observation, possibly longer. And if the heart rate drops again, Garrett asked from his position by the window, if the heart rate drops significantly or doesn't recover quickly, we may need to perform an emergency cesarean section. Dr. Weston addressed both Meredith and her family with straightforward professionalism. At 32 weeks, your daughter would have an excellent chance of survival, but she would need some time in the NICU, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, NICU. The word conjured images Meredith had seen on television medical dramas. Tiny babies in plastic incubators, fragile bodies connected to dozens of wires and tubes, parents watching helplessly through glass windows. She pressed her palm harder against her belly. Please stay inside, little one. Please stay safe just a little while longer. Whatever it takes to keep her healthy, Meredith said firmly. Whatever you need to do, I'll stay here as long as necessary. After Dr. Weston left to continue her rounds, Garrett returned from what he called a reconnaissance mission. He had spent the morning on the phone with what seemed like half the military intelligence community and several civilian contacts, making calls, calling in accumulated favors, digging systematically into Derek Mitchell Porter's carefully constructed life. I found some things. His voice was grim when he settled into the chair beside her bed. Things you need to know, things that are going to be hard to hear. Lou stood and smoothed down her rumpled clothes. I'm going to go find some real food from that cafe I passed down the street. Hospital cafeteria food isn't fit for anyone, let alone my pregnant daughter who's eating for two. She kissed Meredith's forehead gently. I'll give you two some privacy to talk. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Garrett pulled his chair closer to the bed. His expression was the one Meredith remembered from when he had to tell her that their father's cancer had spread to his brain. Derek is in very serious trouble at his firm. He kept his voice low even though they were alone. Some conversations required discretion regardless of the circumstances. I talked to a buddy of mine who specializes in corporate security investigations. He made some discreet inquiries on my behalf. What kind of trouble? The kind of trouble that ends careers and starts prison sentences. Garrett pulled out his phone and scrolled through some notes. He's been systematically embezzling money from client accounts for at least 2 years, probably longer, moving funds through shell companies, falsifying transaction records, covering his tracks with forged documents. Meredith felt the blood drain from her face. Derek had always been obsessed with maintaining appearances above all else. The expensive Italian suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, the luxury German cars that he traded in for newer models every year, the house in the nicest neighborhood that they couldn't actually afford on their combined salaries. She had always assumed his substantial salary from the investment firm covered all of it, had never questioned where the money really came from. How much money are we talking about, she asked. Nearly $400,000 confirmed so far. Possibly significantly more. Garrett's jaw tightened with barely contained anger. The firm doesn't officially know yet, but there's an internal audit scheduled for sometime next month. When that audit happens, everything is going to come crashing down on his head. $400,000, stolen from clients who trusted him with their life savings, while he smiled and shook their hands and promised to protect their financial futures. There's more, Mir. Garrett's voice softened slightly, as if preparing to deliver an even more painful blow. I need to tell you about Tiffany, the woman from the house. What about her? She's pregnant too. The words hung heavy in the sterile hospital air. 8 weeks along, she found out 2 days before she met you on your living room floor. The words hit Meredith like a series of physical blows. One devastating revelation after another. Pregnant. She repeated the word as if it belonged to a foreign language. She's pregnant with Derek's child. She had no idea about you. She genuinely believed Derek was divorced, that you were some kind of mentally unstable ex-wife who couldn't let go of the past. Garrett shook his head in disgust. She's been cooperating fully with me since the ambulance took you away that afternoon. She feels absolutely terrible about everything that happened. Meredith closed her eyes and tried to process this flood of new information. Her husband had been cheating on her for 3 years. He had gotten his mistress pregnant while Meredith was struggling through a dangerous pregnancy of her own. He had been systematically stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from innocent people. He had forged her signature on a life insurance policy worth millions. The pattern was suddenly, terrifyingly crystal clear. He was planning to kill me. The words came out flat, emotionless, shock doing its protective work. Wasn't he? He was going to wait until I had the baby and then make it look like an accident, like one of my falls. Like another complication. Garrett's silence was all the confirmation she needed. I found one more thing. His voice dropped even lower, barely above a whisper. Derek was married before, to a woman named Sandra. She died in a car accident about 4 years ago. Single vehicle collision on an empty road in the middle of the night. Meredith opened her eyes. He told me he had never been married before. He told me I was his first wife, his first real love. He lied about absolutely everything, Mir. His entire life is constructed on lies built on top of other lies. Garrett reached out and took her cold hand in his warm one. Sandra had a $250,000 life insurance policy. Derek was listed as the sole beneficiary. After her death, he quietly moved here to Texas from California. Started completely fresh, built a new identity, met you. The hospital room was spinning around her again. The machines beeped their steady rhythms. The baby kicked against her ribs. Meredith thought about Sandra, a woman whose existence she had never even suspected. A woman who had probably trusted Derek the same way Meredith had trusted him. Who had probably explained away the same warning signs. Who had probably died believing her accident was just a terrible twist of fate. What do we do now? Meredith's voice was hollow, drained. How do we stop him from hurting anyone else? The door opened before Garrett could formulate an answer. A woman stood in the doorway. Late 30s, professional navy blue suit, leather briefcase clutched in her hand. Meredith? The woman's voice was achingly familiar, a voice from another lifetime. It's me. It's Charlie. Charlotte Brennan, Meredith's best friend from their college days at UT Austin, the maid of honor at her wedding 5 years ago. The friend Derek had systematically driven away with constant criticism and manufactured conflicts over the past 3 years. Charlie. Meredith started crying again. The tears seemed endless now. How did you even know I was here? Your brother called me this morning. Charlie crossed the room quickly and wrapped Meredith in a careful, gentle hug. I would have come so much sooner if I had known what was happening. I should have known. I should have seen it. I should have tried harder to reach you. She pulled back and wiped her own eyes with the back of her hand. Then she set her briefcase on the hospital bed tray and opened it with practiced efficiency. Inside was a file folder at least 2 inches thick, stuffed with documents and photographs and printed emails. I've been building this case file for 6 months. Charlie's voice steadied into professional mode. She was a real estate attorney by trade, but she had minored in criminal justice during law school. I knew you would need it eventually. I just didn't know when that day would finally come. She spread the contents carefully across the hospital bed. Financial records showing suspicious transactions. Photographs of Derek with various women Meredith didn't recognize. Printouts of emails that made Meredith's stomach turn. After Derek successfully drove a wedge between us, I started digging into his background. Charlie pointed to a stack of official-looking bank statements. These documents show the shell companies he's been using to hide embezzled money. This one is registered in the Cayman Islands. This one is in Delaware. He's been systematically moving assets for over 18 months. Meredith stared at the overwhelming pile of paperwork. Years of deception laid out in black and white. Irrefutable evidence. Why didn't you come to me with this? Her voice cracked with a mixture of betrayal and understanding. If you knew all of this, why didn't you show me? Charlie's face crumpled with visible guilt. I tried, once. About 6 months ago. I called you and asked if we could meet for coffee. Do you remember that conversation? Meredith did remember, vaguely. Derek had been standing right beside her when she took the call. You told me I was jealous of your perfect marriage. Charlie's voice was thick with emotion. You told me that Derek had warned you I would try to break you two apart. You said I was a bitter single woman who couldn't stand to see you happy. Those hadn't been Meredith's words. They had been Derek's words, whispered in her ear for months before that phone call, poisoning her against her closest friend. I should have tried harder, Charlie continued. I should have shown up at your door. I should have made you listen to me. I should have done something instead of just building a file and waiting. I was being completely gaslit, Meredith realized with sickening clarity. He made me distrust everyone who genuinely loved me. He made me believe that my own best friend was the enemy. He isolated me so completely that I had no one left to turn to. It's not your fault, Charlie. Meredith reached out and took her friend's trembling hand. None of this is your fault. He manipulated both of us. He's been manipulating everyone around him for years. Garrett leaned forward to examine the spread of documents with keen interest. Can we use any of this evidence in court? Some of it would need to go through proper legal channels for authentication. Charlie pulled out another smaller folder from beneath the main pile. But this is what really matters. This is what's going to put him away. She opened the folder to reveal a photograph. Derek and another man sitting together at what looked like a sports bar, beers in their hands, smiling at the camera like old friends. I hired a private investigator about 3 months ago, Charlie explained. He was looking into Derek's background, his previous marriage, his life before Texas. She pointed to the other man in the photograph. This is Marcus Webb. He was the mechanic who serviced Sandra's car 2 weeks before her fatal accident. The room went completely silent except for the steady beeping of medical monitors. The PI found evidence that Sandra was planning to leave Derek. She had discovered the first round of his financial crimes. She had already contacted a divorce attorney and was gathering documentation. Charlie's hands were shaking slightly as she shuffled through more papers. 2 weeks before her car went off that cliff, she had the brakes inspected and repaired by Marcus Webb. Let me guess, Garrett said quietly. The accident was caused by brake failure. Charlie nodded grimly. Marcus died of pancreatic cancer last year, but before he died, he told his sister everything. He had been paid $15,000 by Derek to sabotage Sandra's brake lines. He lived with that guilt for 4 years. Meredith pressed her hands against her pregnant belly. Her daughter was moving constantly now, restless, agitated, as if she could sense her mother's distress, a world where her father was not just an abuser or a thief, but a calculated murderer. We need to find more evidence, Meredith said. Her voice was steadier now, stronger. The fog of denial had completely lifted, leaving behind a cold, clear determination. About Sandra, about the mechanic, about everything Derek has ever done to anyone. If he killed her, we need to prove it beyond any doubt. That's exactly where I come in. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Tiffany stood there looking nothing like the polished professional Meredith remembered from the living room. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy, unwashed ponytail. Her face was bare of makeup, revealing dark circles under her eyes. Her designer clothes had been replaced by worn jeans and an oversized sweater. In her shaking hands, she carried a silver laptop computer. This is Derek's personal laptop. Tiffany walked slowly into the room and placed it carefully on the bed beside all the other evidence. He keeps it at my apartment because he said his wife, she winced at the word, snoops through his things at home. He doesn't know that I figured out all his passwords months ago. She looked up and met Meredith's eyes directly for the first time. He thinks he's so much smarter than everyone else. He thinks he's untouchable, that no one could ever figure out his games. Tiffany's voice hardened with cold resolve. but he's not as smart as he thinks, and I'm going to help you destroy him completely. The laptop changed absolutely everything. Charlie worked through the entire night with Garrett by her side. Forensic analysis of hidden files, deleted emails painstakingly recovered from the hard drive, financial records that Derek mistakenly believed he had permanently erased. Meredith slept fitfully in her hospital bed. Her dreams were haunted by images of car accidents on dark, empty roads, dreams of her daughter growing up without knowing her mother, dreams of Sandra's face, which she had never actually seen but somehow imagined with vivid, terrible clarity. She woke at dawn to find her mother asleep in the uncomfortable plastic chair. Lou's weathered hand was wrapped protectively around Meredith's wrist, even in sleep, still guarding her child, still protecting her baby, even now. Tiffany sat by the large window overlooking the hospital parking lot. She was staring out at nothing, watching the first pale hints of sunrise paint the eastern sky in watercolors of pink and gold and orange. "You stayed here all night?" Meredith's voice was rough with sleep. Tiffany turned slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen from hours of crying. "I couldn't leave, not after what I found on that laptop." She stood and moved closer to the hospital bed. "I'm so deeply sorry, Meredith. I know that those words don't help anything. I know that sorry can't fix what's been broken, but I need you to understand that I genuinely didn't know about any of it." "What exactly did you find?" Tiffany's hands twisted nervously together in her lap. "Emails to the mechanic who worked on Sandra's car. Derek paid him $20,000 total, not 15 like the sister thought. There are bank transfer records, wire receipts, everything documented." Meredith felt the familiar wave of nausea rising. She breathed slowly through her nose until it passed. "There are photographs, too." Tiffany's voice dropped even lower, of Derek and Marcus, the mechanic, at a bar somewhere, celebrating with champagne. The photo is dated 2 days after Sandra's funeral. Celebrating, while the woman he murdered was being lowered into the cold ground. He killed her. It wasn't a question anymore. It was an absolute certainty, a fact as undeniable as gravity. He murdered his first wife and got away with it for 4 years, and he was planning to do exactly the same thing to me. The life insurance policy. Tiffany nodded miserably. The pattern of so-called accidents, the way he kept pushing you to come home from the hospital early against medical advice. She wiped fresh tears from her cheeks. "I pieced it together last night while going through his files. He's been setting this up for months, maybe since before you even got pregnant. All those times Derek had insisted she didn't really need to see the doctor. All those times he had convinced her that her symptoms were exaggerated or imaginary. All those times he had reminded her how fragile and helpless she was. How dependent on him. How lucky she was that he put up with her. He was building a narrative, Meredith realized. A story for after I was dead. The tragic tale of the fragile pregnant wife who just couldn't survive childbirth." The door opened and Charlie entered, followed closely by Garrett. They both looked absolutely exhausted, but wired with the kind of energy that comes from discovering something explosive. They had dark circles under their eyes, but alert, focused expressions. "We found something critical." Charlie sat carefully on the edge of the hospital bed. "Something that changes everything about this case. Derek has been communicating regularly with someone in California." Garrett pulled up documents on his phone. "A woman who reached out to him about 18 months ago. She claimed to have evidence connecting him to Sandra's death." "The mechanic's sister?" Meredith asked. "No, this is someone different. Her name is Victoria Santoro. She was Sandra's best friend." Charlie's voice was tight with barely contained excitement. "Victoria never believed the official story about the accident. She spent 3 years investigating on her own. She found the connection to Marcus Webb independently. She contacted Derek, threatening to go to the police unless he paid her to stay silent." "Blackmail." Garrett's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Derek has been making monthly payments to Victoria for the past 18 months. $2,500 every month like clockwork. We found the records on his laptop. He was stupid enough to keep detailed notes." Meredith's exhausted mind struggled to process this new flood of information. Derek had been paying off a blackmailer for 18 months. He had been embezzling from his company for even longer. He had been maintaining a 3-year affair with a woman who was now pregnant with his child. He had a wife who was also pregnant and who he planned to murder for insurance money. His carefully constructed empire of lies was crumbling faster than he could hold it together, and desperate men with everything to lose were capable of absolutely anything. "He's going to come after me," Meredith said out loud, making the fear concrete, real, something that could be planned for and defended against. "When he figures out what we're doing, when he realizes we have his laptop and his files, he's going to try to stop us permanently. He won't get anywhere near you." Garrett's voice was forged steel. "I've already spoken with hospital security. They have his photograph. He's flagged in their system. He cannot access this floor without a police escort." "What about when I leave the hospital?" Meredith asked. "I can't stay here forever. Eventually I have to go somewhere." "You'll come stay with me in Austin." Lou spoke up from her chair. She had woken during the conversation and was listening intently. "The house where you grew up, 3 hours from here. I've already started making the arrangements." Meredith thought about her childhood home, the creaky wooden stairs that announced every arrival and departure, the garden her father had planted during his remission before the cancer came back, the small bedroom where she had dreamed about her future, the mobile of paper butterflies still hanging above where her crib had once stood. Safety, distance, familiar walls that held only good memories. A place to hide while they built the case that would destroy Derek Porter forever. "What about going to the police right now?" Tiffany asked urgently. "We have enough evidence to at least start an investigation. Shouldn't we turn all of this over to them immediately?" Charlie shook her head thoughtfully. "Not yet. The evidence about Sandra is still largely circumstantial. We need Victoria Santoro to agree to talk to investigators on the record, which one? We need the financial records verified and authenticated by qualified forensic accountants." She paused. "And most importantly, we need to protect Meredith first. Get her somewhere safe and secure before Derek realizes exactly how much we know about him." Meredith looked slowly around the hospital room at the people who had gathered to protect her. Her older brother in his rumpled Marine uniform, standing guard like he had been doing since she was born. Her mother with her worried eyes and endless supply of comfort food. Her college best friend who had never stopped looking out for her even when Meredith pushed her away. And Tiffany, the woman who should have been the villain of this story, who had instead become an unlikely but essential ally. "How long do we have?" Meredith asked, "before Derek figures out that something is seriously wrong?" "He's been calling the hospital repeatedly, trying to get information about your condition." Garrett checked the messages on his phone. "The staff told him you're stable, but they can't release any specific details due to HIPAA privacy laws. He knows something is off. He's getting nervous." "Good." Meredith's voice surprised even herself with its cold determination. "Let him worry. Let him wonder what we know and what we're planning. It was petty. It was probably strategically dangerous to tip her hand. But after years of feeling powerless and confused and crazy, after months of questioning her own sanity and judgment, it felt incredibly satisfying to have the upper hand for once. "I'm not crazy," Meredith thought with fierce clarity. "I was never crazy. He made me think I was losing my mind because a woman who trusts herself cannot be controlled." Dr. Weston arrived for her afternoon rounds with good news. The baby's heart rate had remained completely stable for the past 12 hours. No more concerning dips. No signs of distress. "I still want to keep you here for at least another 3 to 4 days, she explained, "just to be absolutely certain everything is stable before we consider discharging you. But we're definitely out of the immediate danger zone." Relief flooded through Meredith's entire body. Her daughter was okay. Her baby was going to survive. Everything else could be dealt with somehow. As long as her daughter was safe and healthy, she could face whatever came next. After Dr. Weston completed her examination and left, Tiffany gathered her things to go. "I should get back. Derek will notice if I'm gone for too long. He'll start asking questions about where I've been." "Wait." Meredith reached out and caught Tiffany's arm before she could reach the door. "What are you going to do about your pregnancy?" Tiffany's face crumpled with a mixture of grief and resolve. "I'm not keeping it. I made an appointment at a clinic for next week." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I can't bring a child into this world with Derek Porter as their father." I can't do that to another innocent person. My baby deserves better than to carry that man's genes and his legacy. Meredith understood the weight of that decision, the heartbreak behind it, but it was Tiffany's decision and hers alone to make. Please be extremely careful, Meredith said softly. Derek is dangerous in ways we're only beginning to understand. If he finds out you've been helping us, if he suspects anything at all, I know exactly what he's capable of. Tiffany squared her slender shoulders. But he's already made me an unwitting accomplice to something absolutely terrible. The least I can do now is help make it right, whatever the risk. She walked out the door without looking back. Charlie began efficiently packing up all the evidence files into her briefcase. I'm taking everything to a secure location I have access to. I have a colleague who specializes in forensic accounting. She can verify and authenticate the financial records, so they'll hold up in court. And I'm staying right here. Garrett settled back into his chair by the window. Until you're officially released from this hospital, I'm not leaving your side for any reason. Lou stood slowly and stretched her aching joints. I'm going to drive back to Austin tonight and start making arrangements at the house. Stock the refrigerator with real food. Set up the guest room properly. Make sure everything is ready for when my daughter comes home. She kissed Meredith's forehead with infinite tenderness. You concentrate on keeping my granddaughter safe inside you. We'll take care of absolutely everything else. For the first time in what felt like months, possibly years, Meredith felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. It was small, fragile, easily crushed by the wrong word or the wrong turn of events. But it was there, a tiny flame in the darkness, and she was determined to protect it. 5 days later, Meredith was officially released from the hospital. The discharge process felt strangely surreal after everything that had happened. Signing routine paperwork, receiving printed instructions for home care, being helped into a wheelchair for the mandatory ride to the parking lot exit. The same kind of wheelchair Derek had pushed her out of just a week ago. The same kind of physical vulnerability she had felt lying helpless on that cold hardwood floor. But this time, Garrett was the one pushing her chair. His steady hands gripped the handles with military precision. And Lou was walking beside her, carrying the overnight bag packed with the few personal items Meredith had accumulated during her stay. And Charlie was waiting in the parking garage with the car engine already running and the heater warming the interior. Derek had attempted to visit the hospital twice during her recovery. Both times, security had intercepted him in the lobby and firmly turned him away. Meredith had watched from her fourth-floor window as he argued with the uniformed guards, his carefully practiced charming mask slipping, his true nature showing through in the frustrated gestures and raised voice. The second time, he had looked up at the building as if he somehow knew which window she was watching from. Their eyes didn't actually meet across that distance, but Meredith had felt a chill run down her spine anyway. She wasn't exactly afraid of him anymore. The fear had transformed into something else, something colder, something more useful. Anger. The drive to Austin took just under 3 hours. Meredith slept for most of the journey, her body still exhausted from the stress and the medical interventions. The baby was growing heavier with each passing day. 33 weeks now. 7 more weeks until her official due date, assuming everything went according to plan. 7 weeks to build an airtight case. 7 weeks to protect herself and her unborn daughter. 7 weeks to make absolutely certain that Derek Porter would never have the opportunity to hurt anyone ever again. Lou's house in Austin was exactly as Meredith remembered it from childhood. White clapboard siding that needed a fresh coat of paint. Blue shutters framing each window. The slightly overgrown garden her father had planted during his first remission, now full of winter vegetables struggling against the cold. They settled Meredith into her childhood bedroom on the second floor. The same faded quilt her grandmother had made was still spread across the double bed. The same bookshelf stood against the wall, filled with dog-eared paperbacks from her teenage years. The same mobile of colorful paper butterflies hung from the ceiling in the corner where her crib had once stood. I never took it down after you moved out. Lou stood in the doorway, watching Meredith examine the familiar space with new eyes. After you left for college, I just left everything exactly the way it was, just in case her daughter ever needed to come home. The next several days fell into a comforting domestic rhythm. Morning walks around the frost-covered garden with Garrett as her protective shadow. Afternoon phone calls with Charlie updating them on the rapidly developing investigation. Evening dinners with Lou, cooking the familiar recipes Meredith had grown up eating. Her father's famous chili, her grandmother's chicken and dumplings, her mother's chocolate chip cookies, still warm from the oven. It should have been peaceful, a chance to rest and recover before the storm. It wasn't, because Derek Porter was not the type of man who accepted defeat quietly. He had retained a high-powered attorney, filed an emergency motion with the court for spousal visitation rights, claimed that Meredith was mentally unstable and being held against her will by her overprotective, interfering family. Charlie handled all of it with cool professional competence, filed detailed countermotions, provided extensive documentation of the domestic abuse, requested an emergency protective order with full law enforcement backup. But Derek kept pushing, kept filing, kept fighting. He called my office directly yesterday afternoon. Tiffany's voice crackled through the speakerphone during one of their regular update calls. She was still in Houston, still maintaining her cover as Derek's unsuspecting girlfriend. He asked if I knew where you were staying, said he just wanted to talk things through, to work things out like civilized adults. What did you tell him? Meredith asked, her fingers gripping the phone until her knuckles turned white. That I had absolutely no idea where you were, that we weren't friends, that I found the whole situation uncomfortable and didn't want to be in the middle of his marital problems. Tiffany paused. He didn't believe a single word I said. I could see it in his eyes. He knows I'm hiding something from him. Is he following you? Garrett was already making notes in the small notebook he carried everywhere. I think so. I keep seeing his car parked outside my apartment building at strange hours. He watches my windows. Sometimes he sits there for hours without moving. Tiffany's frustration and fear were evident in her shaking voice. I reported it to the police. They said there's not much they can do unless he actually approaches me or makes explicit threats. He's too smart for that. Meredith felt her jaw tightening. He knows exactly how far he can push without technically breaking any laws. Smart, calculating, patient, willing to play the long game. The same qualities that had made Derek successful in business were making him incredibly dangerous now. After the call ended, Meredith sat alone in her mother's winter garden. The late January sun was weak but warm on her face. Her daughter was performing acrobatics inside her, pressing tiny feet against her ribs in protest of the confined space. She thought about all the women who had come before her, Sandra, who had trusted Derek with her life and paid the ultimate price. The 3 previous girlfriends Garrett had discovered who had died in suspicious accidents. All the women who had believed Derek's lies, made excuses for his behavior, trusted his charming smile. She wondered how many of them were still alive to tell their stories. You're thinking too loudly. Garrett appeared beside her on the weathered garden bench, 2 steaming cups of tea in his hands. I can practically hear the wheels turning from inside the house. Meredith accepted the tea gratefully. Chamomile with honey, her mother's universal remedy for everything from stomach aches to heartbreak. I keep thinking about the others. She wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic mug. All the women before Sandra, the girlfriends he mentioned in passing over the years. I always thought his stories sounded romantic, the way he talked about traveling, changing jobs, starting fresh in new cities. Running. Garrett sat down on the bench beside her. That's what it really was. Running from what he had done, reinventing himself every time the past got too close. How many? Meredith's voice was barely a whisper against the cold air. How many women did he hurt before he found me? Garrett was quiet for a long, heavy moment. I've been digging as deep as I can. So far, there's a disturbing pattern. Every 3 to 4 years, he relocates to a completely new city, changes companies, establishes new relationships. He paused. 3 of his previous girlfriends that I can definitively identify died in what were ruled accidents. The teacup trembled in Meredith's hands. Warm liquid sloshed over the rim and dripped onto her maternity dress. She barely registered the sensation. 3? Before Sandra? Before Sandra, all ruled accidental deaths, all within 2 years of beginning a serious relationship with Derek. Garrett's voice was grim. 1 car accident, 1 house fire, 1 drowning at a lake. Serial killer. The words formed in Meredith's mind, but she couldn't force them past her lips, couldn't apply them to the man she had married in front of 200 wedding guests, the man she had loved with her whole naive heart, the man whose child was currently growing inside her body. Does Charlie know about all of this? She's working on building the connections, trying to link the cases together across multiple jurisdictions. Garrett took her trembling hand in his steady one. But right now, the most important thing is keeping you safe and alive. The police in 3 different states can investigate Derek's past. My job, my only job, is making sure you're still breathing when they finally finish. Meredith stared at the garden around her, at her father's rose bushes, dormant now, but ready to bloom again when spring finally arrived. At the vegetable beds waiting to be planted with new seeds. At all the life waiting patiently to grow despite the winter cold. I absolutely refuse to be his last victim. Her voice came out stronger than she expected, more certain. I refuse to let him win after everything he's done. That night, Meredith couldn't sleep again. 3 in the morning. The old house was silent except for the familiar creaks and settling sounds she remembered from childhood. Lou snoring gently in the master bedroom down the hall. Garrett sleeping lightly on the living room couch where he had established his guard post. Meredith pulled on her old bathrobe and padded quietly to the kitchen on bare feet, did what she always did when sleep wouldn't come, and her thoughts turned too dark to bear alone. She baked, her grandmother's cinnamon roll recipe. The index card was soft and worn from decades of handling. Flour dusted across the counter, butter softening on the stovetop, the steady, meditative rhythm of kneading dough with her hands. Knead, fold, turn, knead, fold, turn. Her hands knew the movements by muscle memory alone. Her mind was finally free to wander without spiraling into panic. I had to choose between my dignity and my daughter's safety, she thought as she worked the elastic dough. Dignity could wait. Dignity could heal. My daughter needed me alive first. Everything else was secondary. Lou found her in the kitchen at sunrise. Said nothing at all. Just started the coffee maker and retrieved butter and cream cheese from the refrigerator. They ate the first batch of still warm cinnamon rolls together in comfortable silence as the sun rose over the Austin skyline. Her mother's hands were spotted with age now, the knuckles slightly swollen with arthritis, but still strong, still capable, still the same hands that had wiped Meredith's tears as a child, made her sandwiches for school, signed her permission slips, taught her how to drive a stick shift. I was never truly alone, Meredith realized with sudden clarity. He just worked so hard to make me believe I was. 2 weeks after Meredith moved to Austin, Derek made his most aggressive move yet. Charlie called at 7 in the morning, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. The sound of rustling papers came through the phone as she spoke. He filed an emergency petition for custody of the baby. Prenatal custody. Charlie was clearly reading directly from legal documents as she relayed the information. He claims you're mentally unstable and a danger to yourself. He's citing your multiple hospital visits as evidence of self-harm and neglect. He says you are unfit to care for an unborn child. Meredith felt her blood turn to ice water in her veins. He's trying to take my daughter before she's even born? Can he actually do that? He's trying to establish a legal pattern. Get ahead of any abuse allegations by preemptively painting you as the unstable, dangerous one. Charlie's frustration was palpable through the phone. There's a preliminary hearing scheduled for next Tuesday. You'll need to appear in person before the judge. Appear in person, face Derek across a courtroom. Look directly at the man who had pushed her out of a wheelchair while she was 8 months pregnant and somehow maintain her composure. Pretend that her heart wasn't hammering with a mixture of terror and rage. I'll be there, Meredith said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. What do we need to prepare? The week before the hearing was controlled chaos. Charlie assembled an entire legal team, a family law attorney with 30 years of experience, a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering hidden assets, character witnesses who could testify to Meredith's stability and Derek's manipulation, complete medical records from Dr. Weston documenting every suspicious injury and pregnancy complication. Tiffany provided a detailed sworn statement describing exactly what she had witnessed that terrible afternoon. The deliberate way Derek had tipped the wheelchair backward. His casual cruelty as he stepped over Meredith's fallen body. the shocking lies he had told her for 3 years. Victoria Santoro, Sandra's best friend and Derek's former blackmail victim, finally agreed to cooperate fully with investigators. She had 4 years of evidence proving Derek's connection to his first wife's death. Victor Antonelli, the former business partner of Derek's father, emerged from the shadows with his own damning files. He had been quietly collecting evidence for years, waiting for someone brave enough to actually use it. I knew Derek's father for over 20 years. Victor sat across from Meredith at Charlie's law office, a distinguished older man with silver hair and haunted eyes. We were business partners, friends. When Derek graduated from business school, his father asked me to give the boy a chance at our firm. What happened? Garrett prompted from his position by the door. Within 6 months, I knew something was deeply wrong with that young man. Victor's weathered hands trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. Money started going missing from client accounts. Clients complained about transactions they had never authorized. I tried to warn his father. He refused to believe a single word against his golden boy. What did you do? Nothing. The word came out laden with decades of regret. Derek's father covered everything up, paid back the missing money from his own personal accounts, transferred Derek to a different department where he would have less direct access to client funds. Victor shook his head slowly. Then Sandra died in that convenient car accident, and I finally started digging in earnest. He reached into his leather briefcase and withdrew a thick folder stuffed with documents. I've spent 4 years compiling this evidence. Bank records, phone logs, witness statements, photographs. He slid the heavy folder across the polished conference table. I was waiting all this time for someone brave enough to actually use it against him. Charlie opened the folder and began reviewing the contents, her expression growing more serious with each page she turned. This is more than enough. Her voice had dropped to an awed whisper. Combined with everything else we have, this is absolutely enough to destroy him completely. The night before the hearing, Meredith stood alone in the small bathroom of her childhood home. She stared at her reflection in the mirror above the sink for a long time. She looked different than she remembered. The face staring back at her was harder somehow, older, more determined. The frightened woman who had lain helpless on that cold hardwood floor seemed like a distant stranger now. In her place stood someone else entirely, a mother, a survivor, a woman who would do absolutely whatever it took to protect her child. You ready for tomorrow? Garrett appeared in the doorway behind her, reflected in the mirror. Not even remotely. Meredith turned to face him. But I'm going anyway. Why the dress uniform? She gestured at his immaculate marine attire. Because Derek sees me as a threat, and I want him to remember exactly what kind of threat I am when he looks at me across that courtroom. The courtroom was smaller than Meredith had imagined it would be, wood paneling that needed polishing, harsh fluorescent lights that hummed faintly overhead, the American flag hanging limply in the corner near the judge's bench. The kind of ordinary government room where extraordinary, life-changing decisions got made every single day. Derek was already seated at the respondents' table when Meredith entered. He looked noticeably different than the last time she had seen him. Thinner, paler, dark circles under his eyes that even his expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. But when he saw Meredith walk through those courtroom doors, he smiled. That charming, practiced smile she had fallen so deeply in love with years ago. The smile she now understood was nothing but a carefully crafted mask hiding something rotten underneath. Meredith, sweetheart. He half rose from his seat as if to embrace her. You look absolutely wonderful. Pregnancy agrees with you. I've been so terribly worried about your health. Garrett stepped smoothly between them, blocking Derek's view of his sister completely. Sit down. 2 words, barely above a whisper, carrying the unmistakable weight of a threat. Derek sat down. The smile flickered but didn't completely disappear. The hearing lasted nearly 3 hours. Derek's expensive attorney presented a carefully constructed narrative designed to generate sympathy. The devoted husband and expectant father, the concerned partner who only wanted what was best for his wife and unborn child, the reasonable man being unfairly persecuted by his wife's overprotective, interfering family. He painted Meredith as dangerously unstable, paranoid, easily manipulated by people who had their own agenda against Derek. He characterized the wheelchair incident as an unfortunate accident, A misunderstanding blown wildly out of proportion by a hysterical pregnant woman. Then Charlie took the floor. She presented the complete medical records. 6 separate hospital visits in just 2 months. Injuries consistent with the documented patterns of escalating domestic abuse. Dr. Weston's detailed testimony about the suspicious nature of Meredith's repeated accidents. She presented the financial evidence. The shell companies scattered across multiple jurisdictions. The embezzled funds totaling nearly $500,000. The forged life insurance policy worth $2 million. She presented Tiffany's sworn statement. Victoria Santoro's 4 years of documentation. Victor Antonelli's damning files connecting Derek to Sandra's death. By the time Charlie finished her presentation, Derek's charming mask had crumbled into dust. His own father was sitting in the gallery, watching his golden boy finally exposed for what he truly was. After 20 years of covering up Derek's crimes, 20 years of paying off his victims, 20 years of enabling a monster. The older Mr. Porter stood slowly. His face was gray with shock and shame. Without saying a single word, he walked out of the courtroom. He didn't look back at his son even once. Derek watched his father leave. For the first time since Meredith had known him, she saw something real and unguarded flicker across his handsome face. Fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. Judge Patricia Holbrook reviewed all the evidence in complete silence for several long minutes. She was 62 years old with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed absolutely nothing. 3 decades on the family court bench had shown her every possible variation of human cruelty and deception. Mr. Porter, her voice could have frozen fire. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented to this court, I am denying your emergency petition for prenatal custody. Derek's attorney jumped to his feet immediately. Your Honor, these allegations are completely unfounded. My client is the victim of a coordinated smear campaign by... Sit down, counselor. The judge's glare could have cut through steel. I've heard quite enough from your side. She turned her attention back to Derek, who had gone very still in his chair. Furthermore, I am granting Mrs. Porter's request for an emergency protective order. You are not to contact your wife directly or through any third party. You are not to come within 500 feet of her current residence. You are not to interfere with her medical care or her pregnancy in any way whatsoever. She's carrying my child. Derek's voice rose, the carefully maintained control finally cracking. You cannot legally keep me from my own child. I can, and I absolutely will. Judge Holbrook leaned forward over her bench. Mr. Porter, I am also forwarding all evidence presented in this hearing to the district attorney's office for immediate review. There are extremely serious criminal allegations embedded in these documents that require thorough investigation by law enforcement. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Court was adjourned. Meredith sat completely frozen in her chair, processing what had just happened. The protective order, the custody denial, the referral to the DA. It was over. This particular battle was over. Derek was being escorted from the courtroom by his visibly frustrated attorney. At the doorway, he turned one final time to look directly at Meredith. The charm was completely gone now. The mask had shattered beyond repair. What remained in those familiar eyes was something cold, something reptilian, something that had never been human at all. This isn't finished, he said quietly, just loud enough for Meredith to hear across the silent courtroom. This will never be finished between us. Not until one of us is dead. Garrett stepped forward immediately. The tension in his body was coiled and dangerous. Yes, it is finished, Derek. His voice was absolutely calm, almost gentle. You just don't realize it yet. For a long, suspended moment, the two men stared at each other across the polished courtroom floor. Then Derek turned and walked through the door without another word. Charlie wrapped a supportive arm around Meredith's trembling shoulders. You did it. The first major battle is over. You won. But looking at the empty doorway where Derek had disappeared, Meredith knew with absolute certainty that Charlie was wrong. It was only the beginning of the war. The days following the hearing should have felt triumphant. They didn't. Meredith woke every night at 3 in the morning, soaked with sweat and gasping for breath. Her dreams were haunted by Derek's face twisting into something monstrous, by his cold voice promising that it would never be finished, by visions of her daughter being ripped from her arms in some terrible future that hadn't happened yet. She developed a routine for the sleepless hours, wandering the dark hallways of her mother's familiar house, sitting by the living room window, watching for headlights that never appeared on the quiet street, searching the shadows for dangers that might be lurking just beyond the reach of the streetlights. Her phone buzzed at 4:37 one morning. Unknown number, a text message with no subject line. I have more evidence about Derek, things I couldn't share in court. If you want real justice, meet me tomorrow at noon. There's a coffee shop called Morning Glory on 5th Street. V.S. Victoria Santoro, Sandra's best friend, the woman who had spent 4 years investigating Derek on her own. Meredith showed the message to Garrett first thing in the morning. His reaction was predictably cautious. It could be a trap. Derek could have gotten to her somehow, threatened her, paid her off. Or it could be exactly what it says. Meredith set her jaw stubbornly. It could be the final piece of evidence we need to put Derek away for the rest of his natural life. I'm going to meet her. Then I'm going with you, non-negotiable. They met Victoria at the coffee shop at noon exactly. She was already seated at a corner booth with clear sight lines to both exits. Mid-40s, dark hair streaked with gray. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from years of carrying an impossible weight. I should have come forward so much sooner. Victoria's voice shook as she stirred her untouched coffee. 4 years. I've had evidence for 4 years that could have stopped him. But I was too scared, too worried about what he might do if I went public. You were protecting yourself, Meredith said gently. That's not something you need to apologize for. But other people got hurt because of my silence. Victoria's dark eyes were wet with unshed tears. You nearly got hurt. Your baby nearly got hurt. She reached into her large purse and pulled out a worn flash drive. This has everything. Not just about Sandra. About all of them. All of them. The words hung heavy in the suddenly quiet coffee shop. What do you mean all of them? Garrett asked carefully. Victoria's hands were shaking so badly that coffee slopped over the rim of her cup. Sandra wasn't the first woman Derek killed. She wasn't even close to the first. She pushed the flash drive across the table. There are at least 6 that I've been able to document, going back 15 years, all the way to his college girlfriend who supposedly died in a drunk driving accident junior year. 6 women. 6 lives ended by the man Meredith had married, the man she had loved, the man whose child she was carrying. Meredith thought she might be sick right there in the coffee shop. The information on that drive includes financial records, emails, witness statements from family members. Victoria's voice steadied slightly as she fell into the familiar rhythm of presenting evidence. I've been quietly interviewing the families of his victims for years, building connections, documenting patterns. Why didn't you take this to the police before now? Garrett asked. Because who would believe me? Victoria's laugh was bitter. A grieving friend with a conspiracy theory about a respected financial professional? They would have dismissed me as crazy, just like Derek dismisses every woman who sees through him as crazy. She looked directly at Meredith. But now you've proven that he's exactly what I always knew he was. Now there's a real case. Now people are finally ready to listen. That night, Meredith sat alone in her childhood bedroom, reviewing the contents of Victoria's flash drive on her laptop. The evidence was overwhelming and devastating. 6 women spanning 15 years, all romantically linked to Derek, all dead within months of their relationships becoming serious, all ruled accidents or suicides by overworked investigators who had never thought to look deeper. College girlfriend, car accident, drunk driving was blamed even though she rarely drank. Law school fling, apparent suicide after a bad breakup. Her family had always maintained she wasn't depressed. First serious girlfriend after graduation. House fire, ruled electrical malfunction. Second girlfriend, drowning at a lake during a couple's retreat. No witnesses. Sandra, car accident. Brake failure on a mountain road. And now Meredith. Who would have been next on the list if Garrett hadn't walked through that door at exactly the right moment? She closed the laptop and sat in the darkness for a long time. The house was silent around her, Lou asleep down the hall, Garrett maintaining his vigilant watch on the couch downstairs. 3 in the morning again, the hour when thoughts turned darkest. Meredith picked up her phone and texted Garrett, "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough to see it through?" His response came within seconds. as if he had been waiting for exactly this message. You survived him. That's already the hardest part. Everything else from here is just paperwork. Somehow that simple message made her feel slightly better. The next morning, Meredith walked into her mother's kitchen before dawn, found the flour and butter and the worn recipe card, lost herself in the familiar rhythm of creation. Knead, fold, turn, knead, fold, turn. Her grandmother's cinnamon rolls, the smell of cinnamon and vanilla filling the kitchen, the steady work giving her anxious hands something productive to do. Lou found her as the first light of sunrise began filtering through the windows. Said nothing at all. Just started the coffee and began mixing the cream cheese frosting. They worked side by side in comfortable silence. Mother and daughter, two generations of women who knew that sometimes healing happened in kitchens, with flour on your hands and warmth in the oven. When the first batch came out golden and perfect, Lou sat down at the worn kitchen table and gestured for Meredith to join her. Your father was convinced you would never get married. Lou smiled at some distant memory. He used to say you were too independent, too smart, too determined to live life on your own terms. Dad would have hated Derek. Meredith's voice caught on her father's memory. He would have seen through him immediately. Probably. Lou reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. But that doesn't mean this was your fault. Predators like Derek are experts at choosing vulnerable moments. He found you when you were grieving, when you were lonely, when you were desperate for something good to hold on to. I still should have known better. Maybe. Lou squeezed her hand. But you know now, and that's what matters. You're fighting back. You're protecting your daughter. You're making sure he can never hurt anyone else. She paused. Your father would be so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. Meredith started crying, the good kind of tears for once, healing tears that had been locked inside her for too long. I was never truly alone, was I? She whispered. He just worked so hard to make me believe I was. You were never alone. Lou's grip tightened on her daughter's hand. And you never will be, not as long as I'm still breathing. 36 weeks pregnant, 1 month until her official due date, Meredith was more than ready to be finished with this pregnancy, done with the constantly swollen ankles that ached by midday, done with the relentless pressure on her bladder that had her running to the bathroom every 20 minutes, done with the overwhelming fear that Derek would somehow find a way to reach her before justice could be served. But there was still critical work to be completed before she could truly rest. Charlie had assembled a full-scale legal and investigative team that operated out of her law firm's conference room. Family law attorneys prepared the divorce filing. Criminal prosecutors coordinated with authorities in California, Texas, and 3 other states where Derek's victims had lived and died. Forensic accountants traced the twisted path of stolen money through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. Derek had been officially placed on administrative leave from his investment firm. The internal audit had uncovered the missing funds. Criminal charges for embezzlement were being prepared by the district attorney. The insurance company was conducting its own investigation into the forged life insurance policy. Additional fraud charges loomed on the horizon. And in California, homicide detectives were methodically building a case for Sandra's murder with the new evidence Victoria had provided. But Derek still wasn't surrendering. He filed motion after motion after motion, challenged the protective order on technical grounds, demanded supervised visitation rights for his unborn child, claimed that the entire investigation was an elaborate conspiracy orchestrated by Meredith's family to deprive him of his constitutional rights. Each motion was denied by increasingly frustrated judges. Each claim was dismissed as frivolous, but each one required time to respond to, energy that Meredith was running desperately low on, financial resources that were being stretched thinner with every passing week. He's trying to exhaust you into giving up, Charlie explained during one of their late afternoon strategy sessions. It's a classic abuser tactic. Bury the victim in so much paperwork and legal fees that they eventually collapse from the strain. I won't give up. Meredith's voice was firm, despite her obvious exhaustion. He can file 1,000 motions, 10,000. I'm not backing down until he's behind bars where he belongs. Charlie smiled grimly. Good, because things are about to get significantly harder before they get easier. She slid a document across the conference table. Official court letterhead. Derek's attorney's aggressive signature. He's now alleging parental alienation. Claims you're psychologically conditioning your unborn child to reject him before she's even born. Charlie shook her head in disbelief. He's demanded that the court appoint an independent guardian ad litem, someone to represent the baby's interests separately from both parents. Can he actually succeed with something so ridiculous? He can request it. The judge will almost certainly deny it given the circumstances. Charlie made a note on her legal pad, but we need to be prepared. Present an absolutely united front. Demonstrate beyond any doubt that you're a capable, loving mother with a strong, stable support system. The guardian ad litem hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Meredith spent the intervening days preparing obsessively, gathering documents, writing statements, practicing her testimony until she could deliver it without her voice shaking or breaking. But between the preparation sessions, she found herself gravitating towards smaller things. Quieter acts of reclamation. She went grocery shopping by herself for the first time in months, pushed the cart down the familiar aisles, selecting items based entirely on her own preferences, bought the sugary children's cereal that Derek had always mocked as juvenile, the expensive aged cheese he had called an irresponsible waste of money, the spicy food he had forbidden during her pregnancy because he read somewhere that it was dangerous. Such small, insignificant choices, such massive, meaningful freedom. She got her hair cut at a salon in town. The long, cascading locks that Derek had insisted she maintain were gone in 20 minutes. In their place was a shoulder-length style that framed her face and made her look younger somehow. Lighter, more like herself. She started reading again in the evenings. Not the self-improvement books Derek had approved of. Not the articles about how to be a better, more supportive wife. Real books. Fiction that transported her to other worlds. Poetry that put words to feelings she couldn't express herself. The literature she had loved before, he convinced her it was frivolous and selfish. Each small act of rebellion made her feel more like herself again. Less like the hollow shell Derek had so carefully constructed. One quiet evening, Meredith found an old journal buried in a box of her things that Lou had saved from before her marriage. The handwriting on the pages looked foreign now, younger, more carefree, written by a woman who still believed the world was fundamentally fair and good. "Today, I'm going to be brave," she had written on some random Tuesday morning 5 years earlier. "Today, I'm going to chase my dreams instead of waiting for someone else to give me permission." She couldn't remember what specific dream she had been chasing that particular day. But she remembered the feeling behind those words, the certainty, the joy, the absolute confidence that she could become whoever she wanted to be. Derek had stolen that feeling from her, had made her afraid to dream, afraid to hope, afraid to be anything other than exactly what he dictated she should be. Never again, Meredith promised herself, clutching the faded journal to her chest. Never again will I let anyone make me feel small. The guardian ad litem hearing was, as Charlie had predicted, completely anticlimactic. Judge Holbrook reviewed the extensive evidence that had already been presented. The documented abuse, the protective order, the pending criminal charges across multiple state jurisdictions. "Mr. Porter," she said, her voice absolutely frigid, "you are currently under investigation for multiple counts of murder, financial fraud, and documented domestic violence. You are the subject of an active protective order. You have been suspended from your employment and are facing criminal prosecution in at least 3 states. Derek's attorney attempted to interject with some legal technicality. The judge silenced him with a single raised hand and a withering glare. "Under these extraordinary circumstances, I find your motion for a guardian ad litem to be not just frivolous, but actively wasteful of this court's limited time and resources. Motion denied with prejudice." She turned her attention to Meredith. "Mrs. Porter, based on all evidence before me, I am granting you full temporary custody of your unborn child. The father shall have absolutely no parental rights until all pending criminal investigations are resolved and adjudicated." The gavel came down with ringing finality. Derek's carefully maintained facade cracked wide open. His face twisted into something ugly and raw and true. For one brief moment, Meredith saw clearly what had always lurked beneath the charming surface. The rage, the cruelty, the absolute certainty that he was entitled to everything he wanted, regardless of who he had to destroy to get it. You can't do this to me. His voice rose uncontrollably. That's my daughter, my flesh and blood. You cannot legally keep me from my own child. Two uniformed bailiffs stepped forward from their positions by the door. Derek's attorney grabbed his arm and whispered something urgent in his ear, warning him about contempt of court. Counseling calm. After a long, tense moment, Derek regained a semblance of control. The mask slid partially back into place, though the cracks were now permanently visible. This isn't over, he said quietly, his eyes locked on Meredith's face. You understand that, don't you? This will never be over between us. Not as long as we're both still breathing. Garrett stepped forward, positioning his body between Derek and his sister. Yes, it is finished, Derek. His voice was calm and measured, almost gentle. You just haven't accepted reality yet. 38 weeks pregnant. Eleanor could arrive any day now. Meredith had stopped obsessively counting the hours, stopped analyzing every twinge and contraction. Her daughter would come when she was good and ready, just like her stubborn mother. The news came on a gray Tuesday morning in late February. Charlie called at 6:15 in the morning. Her voice was shaking with something that might have been disbelief, or joy, or perhaps both emotions tangled together. They arrested him last night. The words tumbled out in an excited rush. California issued a warrant yesterday afternoon based on the new evidence. First-degree murder in the death of Sandra Porter. Texas added charges for fraud, forgery, attempted insurance fraud, and conspiracy. He's currently sitting in the county jail. No bail has been set. He's been classified as an extreme flight risk. Meredith sat down heavily on the edge of her childhood bed. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. Her hands were trembling uncontrollably. He's actually in jail? Right now? Behind bars as we speak. The judge refused bail completely based on the severity of the charges and the evidence that he's killed before. Charlie laughed, a slightly hysterical sound of pure relief. Meredith, it's over. It's actually, finally, really over. After the call ended, Meredith sat in complete silence for a very long time. 8 years of marriage, months of escalating abuse, weeks of paralyzing terror, the ghosts of 6 women stretching back 15 years. And now it was truly over. She walked slowly out into her mother's winter garden. The late February sun was weak but surprisingly warm on her face. Lou's roses were beginning to show the first tiny buds of approaching spring. Fresh green shoots pushed determinedly through the cold, dark earth. Life, persisting despite everything, finding a way forward no matter how harsh the winter. Her daughter kicked hard against her ribs, once, twice, 3 times, demanding attention. I know, sweetheart. Meredith placed both hands lovingly on her enormous belly. You want out. You're ready to meet the world. She smiled genuinely for what felt like the first time in years. So am I. The contractions started 3 days later. They were sitting at breakfast in Lou's sunny kitchen. Meredith was reaching for the butter dish when the first wave hit, a pressure unlike anything she had experienced before, stealing her breath completely. Mom? Her voice came out strangled. I think it's actually time. Lou dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the tile floor, but no one cared about the mess. Garrett grabbed the hospital bag they had packed and repacked 3 times over the past 2 weeks. The drive to Austin Memorial Hospital took exactly 22 minutes. It felt like 22 hours. By the time they reached the delivery ward and got Meredith checked in, she was in active labor. The contractions were coming hard and fast now. No time for an epidural. No time for anything but breathing and pushing and trusting her body to know what to do. You're doing beautifully, the delivery nurse said encouragingly. I can see the head crowning. Just one more good push. Meredith screamed, every ounce of pain and fear and rage from the past months poured out in that single primal sound. And then, sudden silence, followed immediately by the most beautiful sound Meredith had ever heard in her entire life, her daughter's first cry. It's a healthy baby girl. The doctor placed the tiny, squalling, absolutely perfect infant on Meredith's chest. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, good, strong lungs. She's beautiful. Meredith looked down at her daughter's scrunched-up face, red and wrinkled from the journey, fuzzy dark hair plastered to her tiny skull, eyes squeezed shut against the bright lights of the delivery room. Eleanor Louise, The name came out as a reverent whisper, after my grandmother and my mother. Lou was crying without any attempt to hide it. Garrett was crying too, though he would probably deny it later. Even the delivery nurse was discreetly wiping her eyes. Meredith touched her daughter's tiny curled fist, watched in wonder as the impossibly small fingers wrapped instinctively around her own. "We did it, sweetheart." She pressed a gentle kiss to Eleanor's damp forehead. "We survived everything. We made it through together." The first night in the hospital was an exhausted blur of feedings and diaper changes and the overwhelming wonder of new motherhood. But threaded through the exhaustion was something else entirely, a peace that Meredith had never expected to feel again. She was no longer Derek Porter's wife, no longer anyone's victim, no longer defined by what had been done to her. She was a mother, a survivor, a woman who had fought against impossible odds and emerged victorious. Charlie arrived the next morning carrying a manila envelope along with a bouquet of flowers. "This came through overnight. I wanted to deliver it personally." She set the envelope on the hospital tray table. "The final divorce decree. It's been signed, sealed, and filed. As of this morning, you are no longer legally married to Derek Porter." Meredith looked at the official documents. The end of 8 years of marriage, Marcel. The end of a nightmare that had nearly cost her everything. Meredith Callahan. She tested her maiden name, letting it roll off her tongue. "I think I like the sound of that." "There's more good news." Charlie pulled up a chair beside the bed. "The forensic accountants finished their complete analysis. All of Derek's assets, the house, the investment accounts, the offshore holdings, everything is being seized to compensate his victims. The firm, the insurance company, the families of the women he killed." Good. Meredith felt no guilt whatsoever, no regret. He doesn't deserve to keep a single penny of what he stole. But here's an interesting twist. Charlie's expression shifted to something like satisfaction. "The house you shared, the one in the nice neighborhood. Turns out Derek purchased it entirely with embezzled funds, which means it was never legally his property to begin with. So what happens to it now? It gets seized along with everything else, sold at auction to help repay his victims." Charlie paused meaningfully. "Unless someone steps forward with a legitimate legal claim to it." Meredith understood immediately what Charlie was implying. That house held nothing but painful memories. Every room was tainted by what had happened within those walls. She never wanted to set foot in it again as long as she lived. "Let them sell it," she said firmly, turning her attention back to Eleanor, who was beginning to fuss for another feeding. "I don't want anything from that chapter of my life. I'm starting completely over." 1 year later, the cottage was small but perfect for their needs. White clapboard siding that reminded Meredith of her mother's house, cheerful blue shutters framing each window, a slightly wild garden in the back where vegetables and flowers grew together in colorful, deliberate chaos. It sat on a quiet tree-lined street in a small town about 30 miles from Austin, close enough to Lou for regular visits and Sunday dinners, far enough from everything that had happened for Meredith to finally breathe freely. She stood at the kitchen window watching Eleanor toddle determinedly through the overgrown grass. 15 months old and already stubborn beyond all reason, already reaching for everything just slightly beyond her grasp, already refusing to stay still or accept any limitation, already a survivor, just like her mother. The past year had been a journey Meredith never could have imagined taking. Derek's trial had lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence from multiple states, emails documenting his plans, financial records tracing his crimes, Victoria's years of painstaking research, the video of Derek celebrating on the eve of Sandra's murder. The defense tried everything, claimed the evidence was fabricated, alleged conspiracy, attacked the credibility of every witness who took the stand. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning their verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Sandra Porter. Guilty of 5 additional counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of 5 other women. Guilty of insurance fraud, embezzlement, and a dozen other charges. Life in prison without any possibility of parole. Ever. Meredith had attended every day of the trial, had watched Derek's confident facade crumble piece by piece as the evidence mounted against him, had seen the exact moment he finally realized that his charm and his lies couldn't save him this time. When the verdict was read, she had felt nothing, not triumph, not satisfaction, not even relief, just emptiness. The closure she had desperately sought wasn't in Derek's punishment. It was in Eleanor's first smile, in Eleanor's first tentative step, in the first time her daughter looked up at her and clearly said, Mama. The emptiness had slowly filled with joy over the months that followed, with purpose, with the daily small miracles of watching her daughter grow and discover the world. Charlie had remained close throughout everything. She had handled all the legal aftermath with tireless dedication, had become Eleanor's official godmother at the christening, had become family in every way that truly mattered. Tiffany had kept in touch too. She had moved to Portland after everything was resolved, started over with a new mom and a new life, found a therapist who specialized in helping survivors of narcissistic abuse. She sent letters every few months, photos of her small apartment, her new rescue cat, the community garden where she volunteered on weekends. Her most recent letter had arrived just last week. You saved my life too, you know. By standing up to Derek when no one else ever had, you saved more people than you'll ever fully know, including me. Meredith had framed that letter, hung it in the kitchen where she could see it every single day while making breakfast. The back door opened behind her, startling her out of her thoughts. Garrett walked in carrying canvas grocery bags in each hand. He had taken an extended leave from the Marines to help with the trial and with Eleanor's first months. Next month, he was finally returning to active duty. Meredith would miss him desperately, but she understood. He had his own life to live, his own purpose to fulfill, his own battles still waiting to be fought. Brought that weird organic baby food you insist on, he said, setting the bags on the counter. And the good wine for later. It's barely 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 5 o'clock somewhere in the world. He grinned, the same mischievous grin he had worn as a teenager stealing cookies from their mother's kitchen. Besides, we're celebrating tonight. Celebrating what exactly? Garrett reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a cream-colored business card. He handed it to her with obvious pride. Meredith read the elegant words embossed on the expensive paper. Callahan Event Planning, creating moments that matter. Charlie had them printed up as a surprise. Garrett's voice was deliberately casual. She said your first official client is already booked. Some women's shelter annual fundraiser. Should be quite the event. Meredith's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the healing kind. Before Derek had entered her life and systematically dismantled her confidence, she had been an event planner, a successful one. She had built a thriving career from nothing, created beautiful, memorable moments for complete strangers, found genuine joy and purpose in making other people's dreams come true. Derek had convinced her to give it all up, had told her that her career was frivolous, that her dreams were selfish, that her ambitions were inappropriate for a wife and future mother, that she should focus entirely on supporting his goals instead. She had believed him. For years, she had believed every word he said. Not anymore. Never again. Tell Charlie I'll call her tonight to discuss the details. Meredith slipped the business card into her pocket like a talisman. After Eleanor goes down for bed, she walked through the back door into the garden, scooped her daughter up into her arms, felt the solid, reassuring weight of her, the warmth radiating from her small body, the miracle of her existence against all odds. Mama up, Eleanor demanded imperiously, chubby arms reaching toward the scow. Meredith lifted her higher, spun her in a slow, gentle circle, listened to her daughter's delighted laughter echo across the peaceful garden. The wheelchair sat unused in her mother's garage back in Austin. Not thrown away, not hidden in shame, just completely unnecessary now. Some quiet evenings, Meredith thought about that wheelchair, remembered the cold hardwood floor of her old living room, Derek's expensive shoes stepping over her fallen body without a second glance. Then she looked at Eleanor, walking confidently now on sturdy little legs. 15 months of fierce, stubborn determination personified. Meredith didn't think about falling anymore. She only thought about rising. The sun was beginning to set, gold and pink and orange painted across the vast Texas sky in watercolors. Eleanor pointed at the brilliant colors with excited, chubby fingers, babbling happily in her mysterious baby language that only she understood. That's the sunset, sweetheart, Meredith explained softly. It happens every single day. Every day, the light fades and the darkness comes. And every morning, without fail, the light comes back again. It always comes back. Eleanor didn't understand the words yet, but she understood the tone of her mother's voice, the love behind it, the safety it promised. She rested her small head against her mother's shoulder, stuck her thumb contentedly in her mouth, watched the colors slowly change as the day surrendered to night. Meredith stood in her garden, in her home, in her new life. She finally understood something important. Derek hadn't actually broken her. He had just made her temporarily forget that she was already whole. The cracks he had put in her spirit weren't really cracks at all. They were the places where she had learned to bend instead of shattering completely. Bend enough times, you discover something valuable about yourself. You learn exactly how far you can go before you break. Turns out, Meredith could go much further than she had ever imagined possible. The last golden light faded from the sky. Stars began to appear, one by one at first, then dozens, then hundreds, until the darkness was filled with light. Meredith carried her sleepy daughter inside, gave her a warm bath, read her favorite picture book 3 times in a row, sang the same lullaby Lou used to sing when Meredith herself was small. When Eleanor finally drifted off to sleep, Meredith stood in the doorway of the nursery for a long time, watching her daughter's tiny chest rise and fall, the peaceful expression on her round face. The impossibly small fingers curled loosely against the soft blanket. She thought about Sandra, about the 5 other women who had trusted Derek and paid with their lives, about all the victims he had left shattered in his wake across 15 terrible years. She couldn't bring them back, couldn't undo what had been done, couldn't change the past no matter how much she might wish otherwise, but she could honor their memory by living fully, by thriving completely, by refusing to let Derek's cruelty define the rest of her days. Her phone buzzes softly in her pocket, a text from Charlie. Women's Shelter absolutely loved your event proposal. They want to meet in person next week to start planning. This is just the beginning, Mir. The very beginning of your new chapter. Meredith smiled in the darkness, typed her response with steady fingers. I know, and I'm finally ready. She walked to the living room window, looked out at the stars scattered across the infinite Texas sky. At the darkness that wasn't really darkness at all, just the space between countless points of light. The prison door had been unlocked all along, she realized. She had been her own warden, keeping herself trapped inside walls of fear and self-doubt. But not anymore. Meredith Callahan was free, and her daughter would grow up never ever knowing what it meant to feel trapped or small or worthless. That was the real victory. Not revenge, not Derek rotting forgotten in some prison cell, not the money or the house or anything material. The real victory was Eleanor's joyful laughter echoing through the garden every afternoon. The stack of business cards sitting on her kitchen counter, the life stretching out ahead of her like an open road full of possibility and hope. The real victory was standing in the doorway of her daughter's nursery, whole and healed and ready for absolutely whatever came next. The real victory was rising, always rising. No matter how many times she had been knocked down, she would always rise again. And that is how Meredith Callahan rose from the cold floor of her living room to become a survivor. A mother. A woman who refused to be anyone's victim ever again. If this story touched your heart, if you felt her pain and celebrated her victory, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Share this story with someone who needs to know that rising again is always possible. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this one, they remind us what we're truly capable of when we stop believing the lies others tell us about ourselves. Thank you for staying until the end. Your time means everything. Until next time.